So this skirt style uses what's called an inverted pleat. So this is the next kind that we're going to be drafting. So the inverted pleat predominantly is used for patterned fabrics, because what happens with the inverted pleat is when we open the pleat underlay or the pleat depth, it can be drafted to have no seam. So what that means is that the pattern of the fabric gets less interrupted when you're cutting that garment out. So essentially it becomes a straight sort of piece. Okay, but you might also notice compared to the kick pleat, it sits a lot more away from the body, okay? So it doesn't quite sit as flat. So it gives you a much more protruding A-line kind of shape. So it's just a different kind of pleat. So this is probably the kind of pleat that's used. Those of you who've had winter school skirts before, this is the kind of pleat that probably was used. Okay, but you can see again, like the kick pleat, it can also increase the hemline for movement. So it's got that same capability. Obviously, this one's got 2 in the front compared to the other one. So to draft the pleat, we're going to use the following proportions. So maybe on a separate sheet of paper, just jot down the following proportions that I have here. So the first step to begin is to draft a rectangle 19 by 28 centimetres. Okay, and we will refer to these other measurements as we're drafting this style of pleat. So to begin the inverted pleat draft, we start with the same few steps that we did with the kick pleat. Okay, so we're going to begin by drafting our rectangle 19 by 28 centimetres, and then drafting in a construction line. I think before we use the measurements of 8 centimetres from that kind of centre line, I think it's probably a good idea to keep them in the same positions as last time. So then you square off the hem, and then forming the dart with the same proportions again. So 8 centimetre in length, 1.5 total value distributed evenly over the construction line. Okay, so once you've completed that step, okay, I want you to take a trace, so a new sheet of paper, because most of the drafting of the inverted pleat happens at the intermediate stage. Okay, so this is my trace. I'm just doing it on a blue paper just so you can see it a little bit more clearly. Okay, so your trace should just be on the pattern making paper. So the first thing is just to cut around the perimeter of the shape, and then we're going to cut out the dart value and then split along our construction line so that we have 2 pieces, one for the centre and one for the side. Okay, so now I'm at the intermediate stage of my inverted pleat. So I've cut around the perimeter, all of that sort of thing. Okay, and down my construction line. So what I'm going to do first is just take that side piece away. Okay, so I've only got my centre panel and I've just stuck it down on my page, just at the top and the bottom. Okay, so the first thing is we start to draft the underlay first by squaring off the seam line. At the hem. Okay, now I'm going to do 2 times the pleat depth or the pleat underlay. Okay, so we'll use similar proportions. So last time 3 centimetres. So what that means is from this point to this point in your scale would be 6 centimetres. Okay, now I'm going to do a height of 20 centimetres. I don't really mind what this measurement is, but you can see it's about halfway down your piece. That would be fine if you did it that way. Okay, so again, I'm squaring off at that top 2 times the pleat depth, so 6 centimetres for you. Okay. and then I'm going to join with a straight line. Okay, now there is actually 2 fold lines in the in the inverted pleat. Okay, so I'm just going to halve that rectangle that I've just created. And just join with a line. Okay, so now we're going to bring the side panel back into use. Okay, so you just need to align it, okay, with the edge of that pleat and along the hemline. If you need to, you can extend that pleat guideline to help you do that. Okay, and then we're going to stick it down also along the hemline and along the top. Okay, so there's just a few more steps to complete that draft. So like before, okay, we want to measure up from that apex point. Okay, so we're going to measure up equal distances, so you're going to measure up 3, okay, and then shaping back to this center line, okay, we're going to use a curved line here, okay, just so we can smooth that in. So when you do the inverted pleat, you can, if you want to, say all this area up here can be part of the pleat allowance, okay, and you just stitch along the seam line. Okay, so we're going to repeat that step for the other side, but in this case we're going to cut some of it away, and really the only reason why we're doing that is to minimize a bit of bulk. That's it, there's no other reason for that. Okay, so there's options with the pleat underlay, and in the example that uses the inverted pleat in your book, I can't remember which number, okay, you'll be able to see that there's a few different examples of those underlays there. Okay, so if you remember back, so this is now basically the shape of our piece. Okay, so we've got our center front, the waistline, okay, then we cut along here. Okay, and following that shape. So you can see it's all one piece now. Okay, so if you remember back to the kick pleat, we also need to draft at this point our spring value. So instead of doing it over the center line, okay, it now gets drafted at the hemline. Okay, so we come in 1 centimeter. Okay, and then we're going back up to the pleat height. Okay, and then we repeat on the other side here. So what I guess is actually happening is the pleat is slightly wider at the top than it is at the bottom. And again, I don't really mind what proportions you use to draft your pleat. You might want to experiment with using slightly different proportions. So we're going to fold, when we do our paper tack up of this pleat, we're going to fold the pleat in the same direction as we did with our kick pleat. So this line here, this spring line, is going to become the pleat fold line, or PFL, okay, and on the side panel this is going to become the pleat placement line, or PPL. Okay, so normally what we do is you'd have a notch there, okay, and probably down the bottom so that you could know where to fold things. Okay, so we're now going to construct the paper pattern so we can do our paper tack up. so that completes our final pattern. Okay, so it's a little bit different this time. So remember, again, I'm just putting it where I need it to create my paper tack up. And again, note, I circled these two areas because they become our drill holes or our tailor tack marks. Okay, so now I'm going to cut it out. So now that our piece is cut out, we can construct the paper tack up. So again, even though this is one piece, I'm going to flip the centerpiece over the top. Okay, and hopefully your pattern pieces match really well because you've been really accurate. I'm going to try and do a bit better job with the stapler this time. So I'm going to just start stapling down the seam like we did before. Okay, making sure my balance marks are matching. I'll put one more in the middle. Okay, and hopefully, again, if you've been accurate, it should be able to fold along that line. So I'm just going to do a couple along my seam line. Okay, and then that all-important tailor's tack one. Okay, so again, now that I've got all my staples in it, okay, so I'm going to continue folding along that center line. It looks like mine's working quite well, even though I've got those fat markers. Okay, so that basically brings it in half. Then I'm folding back that center piece along my seam line. Okay, and then also folding along the pleat fold line. Now, this little bit of discrepancy at the hem, basically because the pleat will always slightly sit open, you don't actually notice that there's a little bit of a funny shape going on there. So again, if I twist it around here, you can see now, if I fold it over, can you see that the pleat in an inverted pleat actually ends up ever so slightly being narrower at the bottom than it is at the top, but it still has that same action, okay, like the kick pleat. So it is quite similar in some ways. However, the kick pleat sits that little bit straighter. And again, okay, this one would potentially be maybe another top stitching shape sometimes that you see is actually one that's a bit more straight. So you might go across like this and all the way up the seam. So that's the inverted pleat complete.